Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman. And today we're joined by guest Mark Mandau, who is the principal consultant of Mandau Consulting. And he comes from the question of rewrites from a product oriented background. And so we are excited to have him on to get a different perspective on the same problem. Mark, do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Yes, hi everybody. Mark, great to be on. Jeffrey and Isaac have been kind enough to invite me to just be a part of the continuing discussion of rewrites. And a lot of the content I've noticed is from an engineering perspective. I come sort of from the half world of business, half engineering. That's known as product. And I have the unenviable job oftentimes of bridging those two worlds. So I'd love to lend some of that business perspective. I've been doing this for about a decade. Before that, business analysis, and I actually come from a research background. So it's technical in a different way. But pleased to be here.
I'm curious. So, most of my experience, the idea of we should do a rewrite bubbles up from tech. Has that been where it comes from you, or do you often see from the product side, product people like we should just rewrite this thing?
I do. As with a lot of things, I'm of two minds about this. So I see it
Yeah.
coming potentially from one of both sides, but for different reasons. So correct me if I'm wrong. So from an engineering perspective is you got spaghetti code. You're sick and tired of fixing other people's, awful code and structures, and you wouldn't have picked that framework, right? And oftentimes
Yes.
there's an architect of some sort that says, hey, there's a much better, cleaner way to do this. We can start fresh and it's going to be faster. It's going to be prettier. It's going to be better, greater ROI, right? They try to throw in some business terms to really sell it at that point. And
Yep.
Yeah, we'll make
pitch,
back
right?
all the cost.
Exactly, right. And it's going to be quick. It's not even going to take that long. And here's why, right?
Yeah.
So now from the business perspective, you got an executive that's tired of being stuck in this loop. Like, why can't you just make this one change? Like, why does it take 2 weeks? Why does it take a month? Why can we not ABC, right? So they're looking for bold new direction, right? They want to put their mark on kind of a bold change, a pivot, of some sort, because everyone's trying to make a name for themselves. And I
Yeah, that's
find
something
in
that's
both,
come up.
yeah, go ahead.
The idea that executives say yes to rewrites because they want to make a bold mark is something that's come up. It was one of the critical things we saw in the Sonos disaster.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, the courage.
The
The
six
courage
hundred
to
million
make that direction.
dollar the six hundred
Yes,
million dollar release. Yeah.
the executives were like, we are bold and we have the courage to go forward with this, and the developers were saying,
Yeah.
don't do it, stop.
Yeah, and honestly, that's worked
Exactly.
for companies in the past for specific reasons that we can get into. But like Facebook, famously 13 years ago, tried HTML5. It didn't work. That was a full rewrite of a limited system, but a very important system, the front end. And then they said, no, we're going native, another rewrite, right? So that's all in, because at that point, they didn't have any good legacy code to go back to. So they were struggling through HTML5 until they launched the native app on iOS, followed by Android. And that actually ended up working for them. And there were lots of sort of mitigating circumstances that they had to then make up for that were expensive, but in the end also paid off. So it's kind of a fascinating case study. I have a little write-up on it that I can share
I'd
afterwards.
love to read that because that's an interesting counterpoint. Yeah. But I think you nailed the one of the things is it took them a long time and it's expensive.
Yeah, I bet you they weren't expecting it to take as long as it did, especially the sort of the second order effects. So,
And I guess that's one other kind of call out too. We've discussed in the past too, like this can be a disaster for a lot of startups. Even 13 years ago, Facebook still had a lot of money. So depending on the case, you might be able to save yourself by throwing a lot of money at the problem. It might be one of those cases where, it was just good for them to actually have that kind of money. But a lot of other places, maybe that decision would have just killed the company.
Yeah, and I think they spent more on it than they let on. I think it was right around
Mm.
IPO time, so I don't know if all those costs are disclosed, but I,
Well,
I can't imagine it was anything less than just tens of millions, if not more, just
I think
because of
it'd
the
be
scope. So, yeah. Well,
famously, it's Facebook bought Instagram at that time for $1 billion,
exactly.
and one of the reasons they bought it was they couldn't update their systems to compete with it.
Hmm.
Yeah, so the Instagram was interesting because they had less than a dozen people, right? And yet they were growing at a
Right.
ridiculous clip. And it was, I think, something like 30 million people in that range that they were growing to. And the offer was 1 billion. I think it ended up being less because the Facebook shares tanked for a short period of time after, they recovered afterwards. But it was all kind of within a year, right, of each other. So I
Hmm.
think what
Hmm.
happened was this. This is my theory. They did a rewrite. It was essentially a code freeze for at least a year, especially on that first one. And they couldn't provide new functionality. They were sort of backtracking, treading water, right? In the meantime, that left the door open for competition. So it could have been Google, it could have been, LinkedIn maybe, right? It could have been sort of, any number of, because social media was kind of like the thing everyone was trying to do back then. And it was,
Hmm.
Instagram of all
MySpace could have
things.
come
It was,
back.
yeah, MySpace could have come back, Friendster, right? But
Friendster.
but it was Instagram. It was just like it kind of came out of nowhere. And
Hmm.
I think the Facebook team even said this was to sort of um, they had to kind of backtrack a little bit, but it was for competitive reasons, right? They did that,
Hmm.
and I think it's because they kind of dropped the ball period, for a short period of time, after which they could continue to deliver new functionality. But it was a performance issue. So I think the misstep was that they went all in on the initial framework. What they could have done is they could have, tested, right? They could have released it to a limited
Hmm.
audience. They could have um, done a non-full production version of it. They could have done like a quick and dirty test to see, hey, how quickly do these things load? They could have done scale tests, but there was a lot of sort of move fast and break things mentality, which is good, but almost to the detriment of the company as a whole. And I guess the reason I bring this up is the best companies with the most visionary founders who ultimately, enjoy great outsized, massive
Hmm.
scaled success, they fall into these traps too. And so a lot of companies have this idea, okay, let's start clean, let's start fresh. And I wouldn't say never. So this is maybe where we part ways. Sometimes it's a good idea in a limited scale, but almost always it fails. And in fact, the stats are on the first try, 9 out of 10 companies fail a big rewrite. It's like dire stats. It's pretty amazing why people still try, but they're like, well, we're special. Here's why
We're
we'll do it
especially,
better. Yeah.
yeah.
Here's why we'll do it
We've got
better.
a couple of reasons that are reasonable to do rewrites in our backlog of history. It's a pretty short list. It's the technology that you're working on is no longer viable. So Khan
Yeah.
Academy had this where they were on Python and the Google Cloud, and Google's like you have to get off Python 2,
Hmm.
Mhm.
and so they
It was a
had to.
hard requirement, so they
It was
had
a
to
hard
upgrade.
requirement.
Yeah, and a
Yeah, and
couple of
so
them, and even still,
honestly,
theirs was brutal. Yeah.
Yeah.
and that's a great reason to do it, but now your back's to the wall. Like you knew,
Right.
Python 2 was coming to an end. And I've been in those rooms where, hey, we got, a bunch of tech that we should do this, but it's like priority 3, whereas we have
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things to do that are priority 8. you cannot justify a priority 3 with a priority 8, right? So you have to reframe it. And the game was lost when you completely deprioritized the tech debt work. And the fix is sometimes seen as, well, we have to do this, as opposed to, okay, how quickly can we ramp up all the stuff we should have been doing, from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
The
That's
never
really the battle.
rewrite phrase. We always say it depends for things, but the never rewrite, I think it's always safer from this perspective. The 9 out of 10 stat you gave essentially is like, always start from the never, and then make your argument back from the never. If you have a strong case, sure, let's argue it out.
Right.
Instead of the other
given
way.
the 90,
Which is,
absolutely.
let's just do it.
If we had a wishy-washy title.
We have a 10% chance of success.
I don't want a wishy-washy title.
But we have 10% chance of success. Talk me out of why we should do it, why we should not do this. It's like, no, that's backwards. Right. It's like we have a 90% chance of failure. Talk me into why we should do it. Like, there should be specific reasons why we're doing it, not reasons why we shouldn't.
Exactly.
But I mean, people buy lottery tickets. That's like a 1 in 60 million chance.
They could win.
Somebody's going to win.
Somebody's going to win. That's true. It's going to be Facebook,
Yeah, it's going to be Facebook.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, or the scammers on Facebook.
Yeah.
They will get the money from you, even if you won. So going back to where we started with the ideas coming, the idea of a rewrite coming from tech, what have you said you sometimes see it coming from the other way, where product is pushing the rewrite. What does that look like?
Yeah, I don't know if product would ever push the rewrite. In my experience, it's always like the leadership,
Okay.
Or one convinces the other, but generally speaking, those were kind of the ways of thinking. Like the engineers, unless they're like engineering leaders, there's a lot of dynamics to this. But if you're talking straight business versus straight engineering, one kind of has to touch on the points of the other's perspective. So why would a business leader kind of sign off on that? I think they realize that engineering's really struggling with digging themselves out of the current engineering stack, right? Because it's not like the first time they're hearing about it. For example, one of the companies I was with, they did a lot of containerization, and it was, it's always a monolith in this day and age, right? That you're struggling with. So there was a lot of kind of redundancy, containerizing, trying to scale it such that it can handle more users. One of the big issues is just the update cycle. It's often like we just can't release this fast enough. The testing takes forever. It's manual. Just the sheer release of it. So what then happens is what I consider the cardinal sin of modernization, which is code freeze of the main system, of the legacy system. So tell me your experience with that, and I'll kind of give you mine.
So we are writing a book, The Rewrite Trap, and that the code freeze is one of the cardinal sins that we call out for rewrites, is the idea that at some point you're never going to finish the rewrite unless you freeze the current code. And as soon as you freeze the current code, it's a disaster. Going back to the episode we had with Khan Academy, they had to do a freeze to do their rewrite. They had a feature freeze for a year and a half, and they lost every single product person, and they had to replace them, and they lost most of the replacement ones as well, if I remember correctly, because for like a year and a half they pushed no new features. They could not change the product, and
that's common.
That was
honestly.
a success.
The person who starts the rewrite isn't the person who's there to deal with the aftermath. It's like they've already made their impact, made it onto the resume, built a new system, right, or whatever kind of line they want on there, and then now they're gone. They're at a different company,
The flip
Uh,
side of the code freeze, when we talk about it from, I mean, different perspectives, but from the
mhm.
engineering perspective, you want the code, you don't want the code freeze because you want to keep releasing things, but then you end up having two systems. You
Yeah,
have the
it's
new
the
system you're
two-system
working on,
problem.
you split your team, you split your resources, and then when you fix a bug, you have to fix it in both systems
Hmm.
because
Yeah,
it's
Or
changed. So
change
you
a
end up
feature.
having, right. And so it's like, okay, do you do the code freeze and kill feature development, or you do this two system thing, updating two systems, burning cache, having your team as you have two systems
exactly.
you're maintaining. So they both those sides have struggles.
Yeah, I have this nice graphic. I call it the doom loop. And I, again, with the messaging, I try to kind of, use alliteration and easily memorable things, but it's dilute, divide, and devalue, right? So you dilute the focus, just generally the focus in the organization by
Hmm.
trying to just have too many things that you have to attend to, two systems, right? You divide the teams. Hey, here's the old team, legacy team. No one wants to be on that team, right? Just to kind of do little security patches and things like that. And then you have the brand new shiny team that will almost never reach parity. Um,
Yep.
it's always going to be like, hey, we're halfway there. We're 70% there. We're 80% there. Actually, it's not quite 80, but we're going to drop a bunch of features. So now it's 80,
Do we really need those features
Yeah,
anyway?
Nope.
Was anybody using
exactly.
those?
It's
Who even uses
asymptotic.
that?
We are every sprint we get halfway. We get through half of the
Yeah.
remaining work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, like one customer represents 80% of the business is absolutely using that feature, right? And then you're like, oh, I guess we got
Yeah.
to bring it back. So, you're sort of dividing your teams and your customers at that point because now,
Mm.
most of your customers on the legacy system, you've stopped shipping new features. It's quickly becoming, kind of fodder for the competition. And you do this long enough, you're going to start to have valuable customers, long-time customers defect.
Hmm.
Or you just say, well, we don't really need them. Let's shed, this business out with the old, in with the new. And then you got a new system that you're not seeing much traction on. You try to
Hmm.
track it, but you probably didn't set up your tools that well. You have a generic tracker, right, on the new system, and you're not really tracking the KPIs that you really need to. Um, Oftentimes, not to get sort of too, basic on this, but it's really it comes down to like your mission, your vision, your strategy, all those kind of things
Hmm.
that half the companies don't even do. There's a lot of stats on that, where now you have different business units that have different reasons. You talked about communication and
Hmm.
alignment, but there are different reasons why the old team would want to stick with the kind of one way of doing things, and the new team is trying to do this
Hmm.
thing, and then maybe there's a third team that pops up. It's like, no, you're both wrong. We're doing it this way. So now you have a lot of just division, and now you're
Do you?
paying like for two or three sets of things, but you're not
Hmm.
Hmm.
making two or three extra revenue, and now it's becoming really painful. So the whole thing's devalued. Now you go to this third D of the
Right.
doom loop. You devalue the product and you devalue your brand because now you're not known to be, delivering on what you say you do.
Small side question, because one thing that we've talked about with the where you get this, you're recreating the original system, which
Yeah,
means that you're often recreating all the things that the customers hated about the original system, and the longer it goes on,
yeah,
the greater the temptation is. Oh, well, we're going to improve all the things. We're going to fix all the things that the customers hate, and so the new system, in addition to exploding just because it's bigger than you thought it was, you now get all
yeah,
these new features and all this stuff, and you eventually, from my experience, you eventually get it in front of the customer and they hate it because you spent like a
right.
year off in the wilderness without actually getting any customer feedback. Is that been your experience too from the product side?
Yeah, in every case, it's kind of amazing. I've done this at the startup level, I've done this at the middle market level, and the publicly traded level, and it's funny how the core anti-pattern shows up in each of those, even though the details and the specifics are different, the teams are different, kind of the mix of like who's driving it is different. But it's always that, there's always some kind of code freeze where it goes wrong. There's always like the customers hate it because it's missing A, B, or C. And I always tell, you know, and you got to solve this at the right level. So that's the problem that,
Mm-hmm.
if you're working on even like a principal product, right, level, or even a director's level, you seldom can you solve this at the director level unless you have sufficient autonomy and you have most of the autonomy for the system in question. For example, if you are just trying to fix the front end and you are the head of the front end, there's a chance you can pull this off, right? Because you can then say, hey, we're not code freezing. We're going to iterate our way through. Or the less desirable but still potentially viable path is we will build that second system and now we're going to make a more complex system to swap it out, right? Because if you're putting the pressure on the customers to do this massive migration, they also have, roadmaps. They also have, limited
they're
workforce.
Working here.
Yeah. So if now they have to do all this work to just get the same or lesser value, now they're like, well, what else is out there? If we're already doing the work, maybe there's something already in existence that's new. Or hey, I heard great things about so and so. I have a friend there. They could give us a demo, right? So you got to make it like stupid easy for your customers to just flip a toggle or not even do anything. It's like, oh, this is new. What's going on here? And then you come in and say, hey, actually nothing's changed. It just looks shiny, but it's going to be 50% faster, right? But your system will get more complex during the shift if you insist on kind of a Big Bang like approach. You have to take the pressure of the switch off the customer. It's a mitigation. It's not a first. Wouldn't be my recommendation. But a lot of companies find themselves in that position. Hey, we've been doing this for 3 or 4 years. Should we just abandon it? It'd be sunk cost, So that's a tough kind of ROI decision.
This is reminding me of was like a Blue Sky post Jeffrey that you found a while back where this guy was like, "Don't rewrite, rebuild," and we were laughing about all these refactor, rebuild, rewrite, and how they're so similar. But his argument was that rebuilding, in his case, was like redefining what you're actually building to begin with. Like, what if you built company A? You want to rewrite it, so to speak, to do other things, but do you need to do the same things you were doing when you began the company 10 years ago? Is there a new direction people are going towards where 50% of what you built is actually useful, but now you're going to actually kind of pivot? So you're not rewriting what you currently have. You're taking pieces of it and actually literally building a new company that's slightly different because this is the new direction.
And what's funny about that is
reframing.
It's all the stuff that you probably should be doing. It's kind of like cleaning out your garage, right? When you should be like pruning all the old stuff, you just kind of dump it in the garage. But when you move, it's like, oh crap, we got to dump half or most of this stuff, and then you give it to Goodwill or wherever, right? Or just the trash bin. So that's kind of what happens with the rewrite.
Yeah.
The analogy with the rewrite, which I don't know if we've used it on the show, but I've done the moving analogy where it's like, oh, well, you start off, you're packing stuff, it's all nice and packed wonderfully, and then by the end, you're throwing everything into boxes, and you're like, I don't even know if I need any of this stuff. I'm going to pack it. I'm going to pay to move it. I'm going to pay to unpack it. And then I'm going to figure out and then you throw away stuff on the other end. And if you've ever moved, I'm sure you unpack something like, why did I not throw this away?
The last 10 boxes are a miscellaneous box. You just
absolutely. This analogy works so well in both moving and software because I've done a fair bit of like modernization to backends. And at some point, you're just wrapping old calls in new call structure, right? And it's like, it's not even, it's actually slower now because you're wrapping it and it's not doing anything new, but now you're just chasing that parity and you're still not delivering. Because, if it took you 7 years to build the system and presumably you haven't wasted any cycles, commercial kind of build, right? You haven't, you've been productive, right? So all those bugs, all those like little features and things, all those refinements, all the refactoring took time, right? So how long is this going to take to rebuild? If you think 1/10 of that time, that's probably ambitious. Maybe half, but it's not going to take you a year. It's going to be years and years and years and years. So it's the sort of, I don't know what the name for it is, but it's kind of complexity bias, right? You think that like, hey, the cleaner system is going to be so much cleaner, but unless just you have a
Yeah.
mental map of the entire architecture because you've been there from the beginning, and you can rewrite it little piece at a time or meaningful piece at a time in your spare time while you're still doing your full-time work, it's not going to work. And that can't even describe 1/10 of the situations where this comes up. So,
Right. To use the word that you
Sisyphean
were
task, right?
using, the devalue. Anybody proposing a rewrite has devalued all the work that went into the original system, mostly
Absolutely.
because they have no idea what it was.
And the brand, because now you've signaled, hey, we're abandoning this. This is stale product.
Yeah.
Not only has it not really been performing well for you recently, we're just abandoning ship, right? But we're not cutting costs because we still have to support it because we still got all you fine people on there.
Mm-hmm.
But this is no longer worth investing in. It's just bad messaging at that point as well. So it's a brand devalue.
That's interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so what do you recommend, or how do you head off
Right.
this
So what do
disaster?
we do? How do we do this better? So the approach that I have is kind of a five-step approach. I call it the peak fix. So if it's the doom loop, the value of doom, then the sort of the visual opposite of that is you ascend to something better. So that's a peak. And it's really a fix. It's not a rewrite, right? You're fixing.
Mm-hmm.
Software is forever, you know, a thing you keep working on. There's always security challenges. It's always kind of this arms race of, hackers versus your security experts. And there's a way where a lot of the security apparatus goes amok, where it actually gets in the way, right? A lot of times of kind of
Mm-hmm.
continued progress, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
five-step approach. So the first one is understanding where you're at, like a realistic picture of where we're at. So I use, the doom loop is D's. So the peak fix approach is A's. It's attend, right, to your ROI. What's the return on investment of this work? Like, how long is it really going to take? And if you've already been working on it for a while, you have some data, right? Like, hey, it's taken
Mm-hmm.
us 2 years. How far did we get in the best case scenario? And if you're saying, hey, we're like 20% there, well, strap in
Oof.
because this is going to take you a decade at best because you still haven't addressed the switching, right? The custom migration aspect of it. You're just saying, hey,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to
Mm-hmm.
have our, MVP, right? Our system ready to test in the wild after a decade of investment. Is that what you really want, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really a risk mitigation approach. So I use the terms risk review because like what's the opportunity risk of you doing this instead of some alternative?
Right.
So it's kind of a diagnostic, right? And it fits into the consulting world
Yeah.
pretty well because it's sort of a low risk way to kind of engage a company. So then you have what are the other 5 steps? I break down sort of the big, like if it were a big engagement, if it
Mm-hmm.
were to turn into that, um, I break it up into three things. The first one is customer because that's what your vision is supposed to talk about, benefit to the customer. That's who's giving you your revenue, the customer. So you have to put customer
Right.
first. Most tech
No empathy for the
successful,
developers.
yeah, exactly. Most legacy and
Mm-hmm.
tech businesses kind of understand that inherently. Um, and yet, they code freeze, so that doesn't make sense. So the first thing is like reverse or do not even consider a code freeze. That's like a freebie that's going to give you 80% of the value. But strangely enough, even if you tell companies that, like there's a whole lot of work that has to happen up and down the organization to message that and to meet with teams and to really make them understand that they shouldn't do this because there's always going to be some VP that's got a lot of sway that's going to be like, hey, we're doing this because we got to like what's the alternative, right? So all these things we've been talking about right now. So a lot of focus on customer continuity. That's step two. Then you got step three is kind of the forgotten step in a sense because again, a macro anti-pattern in all those cases I described is the workforce really suffers, right? People get disillusioned. The
Mm-hmm.
people that start leave. There's a lot of, especially later on, there's a lot of looking to efficiency. All right, which team isn't performing? Your
Mm-hmm.
favorite, director or VP leaves. You're like, what's going on? Should I be looking for another job? And it just destabilizes team after team after team. It's like a domino effect. And I haven't seen that not happen. Like entire teams get let go.
Yeah, that's something we've called out. Is if you approve a rewrite, you've effectively just fired that entire team. You should expect every single one of them to be gone
Yeah, and
within
others,
a
right? Like
year.
it, yeah, you've destabilized your team and basically started the domino and chain reaction of many of your other units.
Hmm.
So this step is really to put at ease, but there has to be bite behind it. It can't just be like, a PR kind of thing inside the company.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to take the steps to signal, to like validate for the people you're messaging to inside the company and also really outside because, word travels, right? Like what's going on at this company. It's
Yeah,
destabilizing. Like, should we continue doing business with them, right? Or like limit our engagement scope. So there's that.
yeah. If this is a piece of critical infrastructure, chaos
Exactly.
inside of a company can be like, oh well, they might be going down. We better start looking for an alternative.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the workforce is really important. So you got a message and you really have to have a good rationale for moves, a good rationale for letting people go. And so you have to kind of, for lack of a better word, invest in a process that even if your team is downsized, that would have
Mm-hmm.
happened anyway, right? In the sense that here are like very clear performance markers. And if you're not meeting them, like regardless of what kind of work we're doing, like you will be let go. But you don't want to focus on that. You want to, set goals and give your team feedback on when they are hitting those goals. Um,
Mm.
so it sort of creates that, hey, if I just heads down and do kind of what, execute towards the vision, execute towards my, quarterly OKRs and ask, good questions when something doesn't make sense. And okay, it seems like my leadership's listening. And yeah, we've adjusted the following, goal planning session based on my feedback. I feel valued. This is going well. There's no way I'm going to look for anything else because this is like my dream job, right? So you just want to
Mm-hmm.
create that like, and maybe I'm describing sort of this, utopia, idealistic utopia, but you
Well,
really
that's
want to
you should
get
always
ahead of
describe it.
yeah, especially in a rewrite, you want to get ahead of that kind of like, should I be looking for another job, right? Sort of mentality
Mm-hmm.
by messaging the other direction and really backing it up. So to the extent that your company can, you want to stabilize your workforce and you want to align that messaging. We are all rowing in the same direction, not, hey, unit one's doing this, unit two is doing that, unit three is doing this other thing, but somehow put together it's success, like that, rarely
Mm-hmm.
that's the case. Um,
Interesting.
Now, there's an article I wrote, which, companies do have inertia. So it could seem like, hey, we've been doing this for the last 10 years and it's fine. It depends how well you started and how much of the business and how good of a brand you have that, sort of customers are still giving you the benefit of doubt, but it does chip away. So big brands takes longer, but it still happens, right?
So
And
for
then
you, for an
mhm.
oh, sorry, keep going.
Well, I was just going to say the final step is actually doing the architectural kind of and technology transformation, which is, all right, what's the direction that we want to go to? You look to your vision, you look to your mission, you look to your leadership that's making decisions, and then you messages all the way across, because then you know what framework is needed just based on like what direction we're going. If you're not clear on the direction, no amount of communication is going to help you figure out a framework. You're just going to be arguing religion at that point, right? It's like, no, this is better. No, this is better. But if you have a kind of an end
Tabs.
goal, you can test it. So don't do any production code. You're just testing for those specific attributes. Is it performant at this scale? Is it performant at a foreseeable future? This scale, this scale, this scale, right? Okay, yeah, there's some legs here. From a performance perspective, this framework is better. Okay, how about a UX perspective? Don't discount UX, right? Is this going to give us the look and feel and the polish that our customers are looking for, right? Is it going to prevent any design elements that is kind of a requirement? Are we going to have to work around with this framework? So there's a bunch of that kind of stuff, and that you're not even doing any code really at this point. You're just evaluating the framework for its capabilities in your direction. And then, those three steps together is kind of the fix, the peak fix. And if you do it well, it's not going to be immediate. You're digging yourself out of a hole, right? You're building steps to climb out of there. It's going to take time. And then, you don't want to just peace out at the end of that. It's like, okay, it all works well. It's all going to work well till the end of time. There's kind of an assurance step where you're stabilizing, making sure that old patterns aren't reverted to, which will happen. So that's sort of the peak fix approach in a nutshell. Yeah.
So I'm curious, when would be the ideal time for somebody to reach out to you for an engagement? Is it when they're already like 6 years into a rewrite, or is it they're thinking about a rewrite? Or
that's the best time,
when
honestly,
when is the perfect?
Yeah, the perfect time is when somebody says rewrite. Even ahead of that, like early startups aren't great payers for anything, right? They're trying to do everything on the cheap or free, or even like if they can get paid for whatever, right? So they're not looking
if you're an early startup,
to
you don't
pay.
even have a
Well, you'd be surprised. Pre-revenue, like the stacks that these guys, like the legacy code that these things amass is incredible.
Oh yeah.
But they're just not like a great customer. But that doesn't mean they don't have the need. So relationship building is great at that point. There are a lot of things because they're smaller generally organizationally. You can prevent a lot of like mayhem, and there's always more work to be done. So I would never say, hey, well, let them dig themselves into a hole because they're going to need us at the end of that. Because no, it's so much harder and dire. Like they'll probably fail before they call you. You know what I mean? So you don't want that. You want a robust ecosystem and you want a good reputation. So what I would say is, hey, I'd love to have little coffees here and there. We'll grab a drink. I need downtime anyway. I talk about this for fun, so it's not even like work. I'd love to talk to you. Yeah, right. I mean, I see you guys. You have, your monthly or weekly like clockwork. This is fantastic. But I'd say, this is the right time to kind of just talk about like general approaches, because these topics are so hairy. Like you could get lost in rabbit holes about just a framework, let alone like the whole, vision, mission thing, and everything in between. Setting goals. So, anytime, but certainly if anyone says rewrite at any point, even if they say modernization, like ears should perk up. And then if rewrite, that's like an alarm, right? Like, okay, use the bat phone because we need to have a serious conversation.
So is modernization a synonym for rewrite in your book?
It's not, but a lot of times that's those two, there's a strong correlation, I would say. It's not a one, but it's like probably a half, right? Because if you're modernizing, like no one modernizes when things are going well, right? Like Google famously, launches new, they famously, they're real time. Like their CI/CD is ridiculous for some teams. It's like they'll, just now somebody probably sent, a release to Google search, some aspect of it. It's just continuous. Every day they're releasing some code. So it's never going to be perfect. It's always going to try to kind of at least get in front of customer demand. That's like the ideal, but but at least
Mm-hmm.
catch up to it, right? So
Mhm.
you're never going to be done. But yeah, rewrites, it's a trigger word for sure.
Awesome. So if somebody
So,
wanted to get, or
mhm.
not if somebody, how do people get in touch with you?
So I have a website. I try to make it short and maybe not memorable, but at least short. It's my last name .co. So the company name is Mandau Co-Executives, and that name is intentional. One is it's really the problem. We didn't really talk about this yet, but at what level does this need to be solved? I think I alluded to it earlier, but
Mm.
it needs to happen at the point where the head of engineering, right, the technical head, talks with the business head. That's oftentimes at the CEO level. If the company's big enough, it's maybe a GM of some sort of or some unit. But it needs to happen at a fairly high level. In the companies where this doesn't work, I think the the person who decides, often the CEO, kind of abdicates those decisions to the individual teams. And a lot of
Mm.
times it's such a critical discussion that they sort of agree to disagree and they sort of do their own thing and make concessions. And that's not the same as planning and like having a unified front. So anyway, mondao.co, and I have links to kind of how to get in touch with me. There's a big contact button at the top. There's a big contact button at the bottom. It just goes straight to my inbox. So that's one way. Another way is LinkedIn. You could just, DM me on LinkedIn directly. Same Mark Mandau. Yeah, I'm
Awesome.
pretty easy to
Thank you so
get
much.
in touch with. Yeah. So, before we finish, I'd love to kind of
Yeah.
hear, because you guys heard all about sort of my approach, but what would you say is the difficulty or maybe like perceptual gap in approaching this topic with the business side of the house? So, what kinds of things do you hear? Like, you're saying, hey, never rewrite. And they're like, but here's why we are going to. Because there are some legitimate cases, and I feel like we can kind of briefly go through some of those.
Yeah, I was just trying to keep the episode from going too long, but it's a great
Oh,
question.
sure.
So I think the biggest problem that I hear is it, how is we talk about the alternative ideas. We call it thesis shipping, the idea of the ship of theses,
Hmm.
where you're going to replace everything. And the pushback we get is, okay, but we've tried bug bashes before, and it didn't work. And
Yeah.
we tried, okay, we'll let you do a bug fix cycle for 3 months, 6 months, and I still can't get any of my features out. Why is any of this going to be different this time? And
Mhm.
yes, rewrites probably don't work. They fail 90% of the time, but it's at least trying something different because we've already tried the other things. And
Yeah.
so what do we have? It's not like we're not getting what the business will say, we're not getting what we need now. Why not try this crazy thing and we won't get what we want anyway, but at
Yeah.
least we're trying something different.
To that, I would ask a question, sort of expecting a particular answer, but I'm curious if it'll match. So, what would you say is the bottleneck in what's not working? So, you're trying to release, you can't really quite get there. What's the typical bottleneck, like the most painful thing about a release?
Are we talking about a release of a rewrite or a release in
No,
general
just
in these
just
situations where people.
what's not working, right? Because this is kind of the discussion that the business team's saying, hey, things haven't worked in the past. We need to change our approach. But what specifically isn't working? And I'm kind of trying to frame it as what about a release process isn't working for the company?
My answer is typically you're in a situation where, due to time pressures, developers are duct taping instead of rebuilding or make like to use the analogy of, okay, you had a company that was the code was right when you started 10 years ago, and now you've shifted the code and you've changed this and you've changed that, and now it's mostly duct tape, and anytime you change anything you end up pulling off 7 or 8 layers of duct tape and then you've got to redo it. and that's why it takes
Yeah.
forever.
So
And
yeah, so the way I
giving
hear
them.
that is the actual work to fix even small things is longer.
Well, I think the work being done is the wrong work. To go with
Hmm.
the analogy of, I don't want you to fix things. I want you to make the code run for the things that we want to do today.
So
Whereas it's an
why would
evolved code base.
so why would a business executive care about the code?
I don't think the business exec. This is the answer to why. What are we going to do differently, and why does it going to work, or why doesn't it work? Just saying, hey, I'm
Yeah,
going to give you 6 months to go fix the bugs, and
yeah.
nothing really improves because
So
fixing the
there's just a
bugs and.
general sense of things aren't working. I guess the reason I
Mhm.
ask this is from a business perspective, like the business executives could have some sympathy for like code and in my experience that's not their priority. They might like care a little, right?
Mhm.
But they generally don't. It's like when they ask for a change or for a functionality, and you're telling them it's going to be like way longer than it has in the past, because like they've been there 5, 10 years,
Mhm.
right? Maybe. So like, hey, this used to take like, my guy used to do this like in an afternoon. Why are you telling me it's 2 weeks now, right? Maybe there's something wrong with the code. Maybe it's too busy. Like maybe there's too many things that we don't need in there. Let's start fresh, right? That's kind of the logic. And although a lot
Mm.
of that's true, I think it's just the timelines are stretched out, and the result is they're getting a sense from you that it's a workaround. It's not ideal. It's like, hey, this is and then like there's another change and something else breaks that was unintended, right? So now you're doing a lot
Right.
of QAing, and QA is messing things, but it's also taking long. So to me, it's like lengthened timelines, time to money, right? Time to functionality, time to
Mhm.
money. So I think that's what they care about, and it's that's fair.
Right.
Um,
Well, there's also uncertainty in there, where
hmm
if they ask, like, if they can say, okay, this feature would be worth $1 million in revenue, but I don't know how
Yeah,
long it's going to take to build it, and it's only going to be worth $1 million in revenue if we can get it out in the next 6 weeks, and if we can't get it out for 6 months, it's not. It'll only be worth 500,000 in revenue, and so suddenly it becomes this. They're playing our. What do I actually believe is going to happen?
yeah,
If I can get it in 6 weeks, it's worth it. If I can get it in 6 months, it's not worth it. And if I get
yeah.
it in a year, I don't even care anymore.
Right, right. And if you get a lot of those kinds of long estimates, then that's when it starts to break. But by then there's so many things wrong that they want to just fix it, right? But there's really, like we discussed, there's no shortcut to that. You cannot shortcut that process. So the system that I would really focus on to put in the resources to fix is the testing process and the release pipeline, which is, testing is a part of that. So a lot of testing automation, that's really a pain point though, because testing automation takes a long time and it's kind of brittle a lot of times, right? And we didn't even
Mm-hmm.
talk about AI, how that can be sort of in the loop of like, shortening that development process. But it's those timelines, and I think if we can demonstrate that the realistic timeline for a rewrite isn't shorter, it's longer, then
Mm-hmm.
the deep, work that needs to be done, the peak fix, right? It
Yeah.
becomes a viable path. Um, and that sort of reframes the conversation. But that's by then you're in such a hole like framing wise
Yeah.
that it becomes hard. So that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Good data
There
point.
was
Thanks, guys.
there was someone, I forget who said this, but he said what you need is many much smaller steps. And he had this whole long discussion of, people think, oh well, if a rewrite is 10 steps, like a size 10,
Yeah.
and somebody says, oh no, I'm going to iteratively replace this thing, and it's going to be 10 steps of size 1. An executive might hear that and say, oh well, if they're both 10, it's the same thing. It's like, no, no, no.
Yeah.
A giant step is so much harder and so much riskier and
Mhm.
so much
Yeah.
more likely to fail.
Yeah. It's unnecessary
So
risk, and it's the kind of the unknown unknown. Absolutely. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
guys, this was
I've got a lot
amazing.
more of this. Yeah, I've got a lot more to say on this too. I would love to have you back for a part two. I know we're kind of coming up on time here.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Like there's a different answer I was going to give about, like, for example, why to rewrite. One of them, the Nozomi project that Jeffrey and I worked on, was essentially like our old code was not sending emails fast enough, and there was a
Hmm.
bunch of fixes to make it send faster. But at
Mhm.
some point, we're like, is this an architectural overhaul? So I'd love to get into the conversations like that if you would like to come back on and like keep
Absolutely.
diving into like this battle between executives and products and tech,
Right.
because there's a
Well, it
lot more
sounds
to
great at
tease
the
out
high
here, but I
level,
think we're right up
but
on
yeah,
time.
you ground it into that kind of example, and now there's some real decisions to be made, right? That aren't as obvious at the higher level. So I'd love to dive into
Yeah, that would be a
those
great.
case studies and scenarios.
Yeah, because the business wanted faster, and the developers hated the code, and so they tried to marry it with a rewrite of it'll be faster because the code will be good.
So let's
Yeah,
touch into that one next time, because we have to
Yes.
yeah,
close off
it
here.
sounds like fun.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. We're coming up on an hour. Awesome. Thank you
Oh
so
my,
much, Mark.
yeah. Hmm.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
I'm Isaac Askew, and this is Never Rewrite.